the slave girl who poisoned 100 masters, and they never knew. In the dead of night, a faint mist clung to the swamps of the deep south. The moonlight barely pierced the thick fog, but in a small, creaking cabin, a young girl named Celeste stood with a quiet, determined look in her eyes. She was barely 14, but her gaze was as sharp as a dagger. Her hands worked with the precision of a surgeon, crushing a handful of leaves, grinding them into a fine green paste. This was no ordinary paste. It was poison. Celeste had been born into chains, the daughter of an enslaved woman who whispered stories of freedom while braiding her hair by the fire. But freedom was a dream, and survival was a brutal reality. The plantation where she toiled was a kingdom of suffering. Men, women, and children worked under the scorching sun, their backs scarred from the overseer's whip. But Celeste was different. She listened, she learned, and she remembered. Her mother had known the secrets of the earth, the leaves that healed and the ones that killed. But where her mother saw medicine, Celeste saw something else. A weapon. Her first target was a cruel overseer, a man named Silas. He was a monster in human form, a man who saw the enslaved not as people but as property. He had beaten Celeste's mother to death for daring to speak up, leaving the girl an orphan. And in that moment, something inside Celeste changed. Silas loved his whiskey. Every night, he would drink himself into a stupor, laughing, boasting about his cruelty. But tonight would be different. As he drank, he would never notice the faint, bitter taste. He would never see the thin, trembling smile on Celeste's face as she served him. By morning, Silas was dead. But no one suspected the quiet, obedient girl who cleaned the kitchen. They thought it was his own greed, his own excess. But Celeste knew, and for the first time, she felt a strange, cold sense of power. But this was only the beginning. Silas was only the first, but he would not be the last. Word spread quickly on the plantation that the cruel overseer had died in his sleep, his face twisted in agony. But the other overseers didn't care. They were too busy fighting over who would take his place, too drunk on their own power to notice the quiet girl with the sharp eyes. Celeste became invisible again, but she was always watching. She learned their habits, their routines, and their vices. Most of them were greedy, gluttonous men who treated the enslaved people like cattle. And every night they drank. Rum, whiskey, moonshine. It didn't matter, and Celeste knew that their thirst would be their undoing. Her second target was a man named Harold. He was a gambler, a man who saw the world as a game, with the enslaved people as his pawns. He would force men to fight each other for his amusement, betting on who would survive. He would starve them, torture them, and laugh as they begged for mercy. One night, Harold was celebrating a big win. He drank deep from a flask he always carried, laughing and boasting to his friends. But tonight, his laughter turned to coughing. His friends thought he was just drunk, slapping him on the back. But soon he fell to the ground, his face turning pale, his lips turning blue. He died, choking on his own breath. And again, no one suspected Celeste. She was just the quiet girl who swept the floors, who never spoke unless spoken to. But with each death, she felt a dark satisfaction. She was powerless in every way except one, her poison. But as her list of victims grew, so did the whispers. People began to fear the curse of the plantation, a shadow that seemed to follow the cruel and the wicked. And Celeste was always there, watching, waiting, planning. But she knew she couldn't do this forever. One day, someone would notice. One day, someone would catch her. And the thought terrified her, but it also thrilled her. The whispers grew louder. The plantation was cursed, they said, a shadow that touched the wicked. Overseers whispered of bad luck, of death that came without a warning. They became paranoid, watching their own backs, suspecting each other. But no one suspected the quiet girl with the downcast eyes. Celeste listened to their fear, and she smiled. Fear was her ally now. But not everyone was blind. One of the enslaved men, an old healer named Jonah, noticed the strange, secretive way Celeste moved. He had seen her collecting herbs, watched her grinding leaves in the dark. He had once been a healer in his village, far across the ocean. He knew the plants that could save lives, and those that could take them. Jonah pulled Celeste aside one night, his voice low and urgent. "Girl, you playing with fire. Fire that will burn you." But Celeste's eyes were cold. "They started this fire. I'm just giving it back." Jonah begged her to stop, but she was beyond fear. Her hatred was a river, and she was drowning in it. And then, something changed. The master of the plantation fell ill. He was a cruel, greedy man who saw himself as a king among slaves. His illness came suddenly, a fever that burned through him, leaving him weak and delirious. But Celeste hadn't touched his food. She hadn't touched his drink. Someone else had. There was another poisoner on the plantation. The plantation was gripped by terror. The whispers became screams. The master was dying and no one knew why. He had always been a tyrant, but now he was just a shadow of himself, pale, shaking, and delirious. But Celeste watched, and she knew the truth. Someone else had learned the dark art of poison. Her suspicion fell on Jonah. He knew the herbs. He had warned her, but had he also learned from her? Or was there someone else hiding in the shadows? Celeste became paranoid. Every cup of water, every piece of bread she touched, she wondered if it was poisoned. She was no longer just a predator. She was now prey. But then the bodies began to pile up, not just the overseers, but the house servants, even the master's family. Panic swept the plantation. No one was safe. The slaves whispered of a vengeful spirit, but Celeste knew better. Someone else was playing the same deadly game. Celeste tried to stay invisible, but fear made her reckless. She began to test her own food, watching everyone around her. She saw Jonah staring at her with pity. Or was it guilt? She didn't trust anyone. Then, one night, she found a small pouch of crushed leaves hidden beneath the kitchen floorboards, the same leaves she used, the same deadly poison. Her heart pounded. Someone knew her secret. Someone had learned her craft. And then the master died, writhing in agony, his voice a gurgle of pain. The plantation went silent, and the rumors became a roar. "There's a witch among us, a curse!" cried the overseers. They dragged out the slaves, searching for the guilty one. Celeste felt their eyes on her. She had started this fire, but now it was a wildfire she couldn't control. Chaos consumed the plantation. The overseers were desperate, dragging out the enslaved people, accusing them, beating them, trying to force a confession from anyone who looked suspicious. But no one knew the truth, except Celeste. But Celeste's fear grew sharper with each passing day. The unknown poisoner was out there, somewhere in the shadows. Someone who knew her methods. Someone who was more reckless, more dangerous. The rumors of witchcraft spread like wildfire. The overseers decided to bring in a preacher, a fire and brimstone minister from the nearby town. He arrived like a storm, a tall, thin man with a voice like thunder, preaching of sin, damnation, and the fires of hell. He called for a purification of the plantation. "There is a devil among you, a witch hiding in the shadows," he roared, his voice echoing over the fields. "And I will find her." The slaves were gathered in the yard, forced to kneel under the burning sun. One by one they were questioned, threatened, and beaten. Celeste kept her head low, her heart pounding, her fists clenched. She was no longer just a hunter. She was now the hunted. Then the preacher called out Jonah. The old healer was dragged forward, and the preacher's eyes burned into him. "This one knows the secrets of herbs. This one whispers to the shadows," the preacher accused. Jonah stood tall, his old eyes fierce. "I know the herbs that heal, not the poison that kills." But the preacher saw only what he wanted to see. He ordered Jonah tied to the whipping post. The overseers lashed him, demanding a confession. Blood stained the dirt. Jonah's voice did not break. Celeste felt her world closing in. She knew she had to act. But would she save Jonah, exposing herself? Or would she let him take the blame for a sin that was hers and someone else's? And then, as Jonah fell limp, the preacher turned, his eyes searching the crowd. "Bring me the girl," he whispered, "the quiet one." And so, the story of Celeste, the quiet girl with the deadliest secret, becomes a chilling reminder of the darkness that grows when cruelty is left unchecked. Her actions were born from pain, but they spiraled into a nightmare she could no longer control. But this story is not just about vengeance. It is about how hatred can consume even the innocent, how the oppressed can become the monsters they once feared. If you've been captivated by this tale, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Uncle Luke Tells, because history is full of stories that shock, inspire, and warn, and I've got plenty more to share. See you in the next one.